Most people choke. Big presentation, brain goes blank. Job interview, forget everything you prepared. Final exam, total whiteout. You knew the material, you practiced, and then when it actually mattered, nothing. You froze. Olympic athletes don't freeze. They perform better under pressure than they do in practice. Not because they're built differently, not because they don't feel nervous, because they trained differently. And I mean that literally. They trained their nervous system to treat a stadium full of screaming people as the optimal condition for peak performance. That's not talent, that's a system. And by the end of this video, you'll have it. I reverse engineered the psychological protocols used by Olympic sprinters, military snipers, and ER surgeons. The same 3 methods, used across completely different fields, all produce the same result: total composure when everything is on the line. Here's exactly what they are. Chapter 1, the simulation gap. Here's what most people do wrong. They practice in perfect conditions. Quiet room, no pressure, same desk, same playlist, same routine, everything controlled. Then the real moment hits, and the environment is completely different. Bright lights, other people are watching, clock ticking, heart rate spiked, and your brain panics. Why? Because your brain encoded the skill in one context, and it's being asked to perform it in a completely different one. Psychologists call this context-dependent memory. Your brain doesn't just store information, it stores information attached to an environment. Change the environment, and retrieval breaks down. Sports psychologist Jim Taylor studied this for decades. He found that athletes who only train in low-pressure conditions suffer massive performance drops in competition, not because they forgot the skill, because the skill was never trained in the right context. The environment is part of the memory. Think about it. You can recite your presentation perfectly in your bedroom. You stand in front of 10 people and your mouth goes dry. You didn't forget the words. Your brain filed them under safe room, alone, no stakes. The boardroom doesn't match the file. Access denied. What Olympic athletes do instead? They manufacture pressure, intentionally, constantly. Sprinters don't just run. They invite coaches to watch every single rep. They time themselves. They trash talk each other. They simulate the noise of a crowd with speakers blasting at full volume during practice. They practice missing the start so they know what panic feels like. They don't avoid the uncomfortable feeling. They train inside it until it becomes familiar. Familiar is the opposite of threatening. When your brain recognizes an environment, it stops wasting energy on threat assessment and routes all resources to performance. That's the switch. Practice in chaos so chaos becomes home. Your version of this is not complicated. You're preparing for a job interview. Do mock interviews with strangers on the phone, not just your friend who wants you to succeed. You're studying for an exam? Put on background noise. Set a timer. Occasionally have someone walk into the room and ask you a question mid-study. Make the rehearsal uncomfortable on purpose. The more your practice environment resembles the real environment, the more your brain treats them as the same event. The simulation gap is the difference between people who practice and people who perform. Close the gap. But the practice environment is only half the problem. The other half is what's happening inside your skull. That's where Chapter 2 gets brutal. Chapter 2, Rewiring the Stress Response. Here's the thing nobody tells you about pressure. Your body's stress response is not your enemy. It's a performance enhancer. The problem is, you've been taught to interpret it wrong. Heart racing before a presentation, sweaty palms, shallow breathing. You label that as anxiety. You tell yourself you're nervous. You interpret the feeling as a warning signal. Something is wrong. I'm going to fail. And that interpretation crushes you. Not the feeling itself, the story you attach to it. Stanford psychologist Alison Wood Brooks ran a study on this in 2014. She took people about to perform a high-pressure task, singing in front of judges, public speech, math under time pressure. One group was told to say, "I am calm." Another group was told to say, "I am excited." The excited group performed dramatically better across every single metric. Same physiological state, completely different outcome, because the label changed the strategy. When you tell yourself you're anxious, your brain switches to avoidance mode. Find the exit. Minimize damage. Survive. When you tell yourself you're excited, your brain switches to approach mode. Engage fully, go after it, win. The body feels identical. The performance is completely different. Olympic athletes call this the activation performance link. They don't try to calm down before a race, they channel up. Elite sprinters backstage before the gunfires are not meditating, they're bouncing, talking loudly, playing music. They're using arousal as fuel, not sedating it. But here's where it gets more interesting. It's not just about the label. It's about building what sports psychologists call stress inoculation. This is a military protocol, developed to train soldiers to function under genuine life or death situations. The method is simple, brutal, and it works. You expose yourself to increasing levels of stress, repeatedly, until your nervous system recalibrates its baseline. The first time you speak in public, your heart rate spikes to 160 and you can't breathe. The 10th time, it spikes to 120. The 50th time, it spikes to 95. Your brain stops treating public speaking as a tiger in the bushes. It files it under manageable threat. Not because you got braver, because you train the nervous system with data. Every time you avoid the uncomfortable situation, you confirm to your brain that it was right to be scared. Every time you walk into it anyway, you send a different signal. I went in. I survived. Threat level reduced. Your courage is not a personality trait. It's a training variable. Psychologist Martin Seligman built an entire framework around this. He called it learned helplessness. When you repeatedly fail to control outcomes, your brain stops trying, gives up before the attempt. The reverse is also true, learned mastery. Every time you put yourself under pressure and perform, your brain updates its model. I can do this. I have done this. I will do this again. So stop avoiding the hard room. Stop asking for extensions. Stop practicing only when you feel ready. You never feel ready before a real performance. That feeling is the training. If it feels easy, it isn't working. 2 chapters down, here's the one that separates professionals from everyone else. Chapter 3, the reset protocol. Here's what happens to most people in the middle of a high-pressure performance. They make one mistake, a single slip. They forget one word, they stumble on one calculation, and then they spiral. The mistake consumes their focus. They start mentally reviewing what went wrong instead of executing what comes next. 1 error becomes 2, 2 become 5. The whole thing collapses. Watch amateurs under pressure and watch professionals. The difference isn't the number of mistakes, it's the recovery time. Professionals make mistakes too. They have a shorter gap between the error and the reset, sometimes under 1 second. That gap is a skill, and it is trainable. Tennis players have a ritual between every single point. Win a point or lose a point, same ritual. Walk to the back of the court. Bounce the ball exactly 4 times. Take 1 breath. Reset. Why? Because it breaks the emotional chain. It signals to the brain that the point is over. New information only. Emotional processing is closed. Golfers call it the 10-second rule. After a bad shot, you have 10 seconds to feel whatever you want. Angry, frustrated, embarrassed. After 10 seconds, face forward. The emotion gets a window, not a residence. It can visit, it can't stay. Performance psychologist Bob Rotella has worked with professional golfers, baseball players, and Olympians for 4 decades. His core finding? The best performers have 2 distinct mental modes. Analytical mode for preparation and review, performance mode for execution. The number 1 mistake non-professionals make? They run analytical mode during execution. They think about mechanics while performing. They review errors mid-performance, and it destroys them. Ever hear the phrase paralysis by analysis? It's neurologically accurate. Your prefrontal cortex, the thinking, planning, and evaluating part of your brain, competes directly with your motor cortex for resources. When one is active, the other is suppressed. When you're thinking about your technique mid-performance, you're literally shutting down the part of your brain that executes the technique. The training has to go deep enough that the skill lives below conscious thought. Automatic. Trusted. And that only happens through one method: repetition under pressure, not in comfort. This is why elite musicians don't think about fingering during a concert. The fingering is stored in procedural memory. It runs automatically while the conscious mind focuses on expression, timing, and audience. Analyzing fingering mid-performance would be like consciously controlling each step while trying to run. You'd fall over. So here's the reset protocol you can start today. Every practice session, build in deliberate disruptions. Pause mid-task. Force yourself to restart. Practice specifically the skill of coming back. Because in real performance, the question is never, will I make a mistake? It will always be, how fast can I recover? Build the ritual. Pick a physical anchor, a breath, a phrase, a movement. Every time you need to reset, use it. Do this in training until it becomes automatic. When the real moment hits and your brain is flooded with cortisol and adrenaline, you don't have access to complex instructions. You have access to deeply drilled habits. Make the reset one of them. But here's the problem though. You can simulate pressure. You can reframe your stress response. You can build a reset ritual. But if you haven't loaded the right information deeply enough, none of it matters. Composure under pressure without competence is just confident incompetence. That's a disaster wearing a smile. Most people think confidence comes first. Wrong. Competence comes first. Confidence is the byproduct. And competence under pressure requires a completely different kind of preparation than most people use. You need what military planners call decision architecture. Pre-made decisions for anticipated scenarios. You don't decide in the moment, you execute the decision you already made when you were calm. Navy SEAL mission planning spends 80% of its time on contingencies. What happens if this goes wrong? What if the door is locked? What if there are unexpected hostiles? What if communications fail? For every scenario, a pre-decided response. When the chaos hits, there is no thinking required. Thinking under fire is slow and unreliable. Execution of a pre-planned decision is fast and confident. Your version. Before any high-stakes performance, map the likely failure points. What are the 3 questions you're most afraid of being asked? Prepare the answers until they're automatic. What's the most likely technical problem? Know the workaround cold. What happens if you lose your place? Have a transition phrase that buys you 5 seconds. Pre-make every decision you might need to make under pressure. Walk in with a full playbook. Not because the plan will hold perfectly, because the preparation trains your brain to treat the situation as familiar, and familiar things don't trigger panic. The reason most people never stop choking isn't talent. It isn't confidence. It isn't even preparation. It's that they prepare in the wrong conditions, interpret their stress response as a threat, have no reset mechanism, and show up to high-stakes moments hoping for the best. Olympic athletes don't hope. They engineer. They build the exact mental and physical conditions that make peak performance the most likely outcome. Not guaranteed, likely. And likely, repeated enough, becomes consistent. And consistent becomes who you are. Close the simulation gap. Train in the environment where you'll perform. Reframe the stress response. Excitement activates. Anxiety shuts down. Same feeling, your call. Build the reset. Mistakes are not the problem. Spiraling after mistakes is. And pre-decide. Walk in with the playbook already written. You now have a system that most people will never use. Not because they don't know it, because doing it is uncomfortable. That's the irony. The discomfort of the training is exactly what makes it work. Avoiding discomfort now guarantees you'll choke in the moment that matters most. The athletes who stand on podiums didn't get there despite the pressure. They got there because they trained inside it. That's not almost unfair. That's the whole point. By the way, I built this entire protocol into a 1-page document you can print. The pressure simulation checklist, the stress reframe script, the reset ritual builder. Link in the description, free. But there's still one problem. You can perform under pressure, but if you're forgetting 90% of what you need to know before you even get to that moment, what's the point? That's why I made this video breaking down exactly how the best memorizers in the world lock information in permanently. Watch it next.